Hello everybody, Jake, your resident content cowboy here. Yeehaw, it's Monday. It's not Monday. On Mondays, we do tier lists, and on Wednesdays, we wear pink.
On Wednesdays, we wear pink.
What I'm going to do today is I'm going to try to rank every single card in Space-Time Smackdown, at least all the relevant ones. I'll talk about some of the ones that I'm not really ranking. I'm going to talk supporters, non-EX, and EX Pokemon in this tier list. I'm going to put them up on our beautiful list. We have our tiers for the week. Our God tier, we only put one card in our God tier. We're not friggin' Norse around here. Our S tier, these things are incredible. Our A tier, extremely good and relevant cards. Our B tier, still got the B tier. These cards are fine. They see some success. C tier, I think these cards are a little disappointing. And finally, our D tier, a tier for cards that I just don't think have a lot of value currently. And then the need more time tier. This tier is for cards that need more time before I can really give you a great idea. So that tier kind of is self-explanatory. I want to start with supporter cards because there have been some amazing supporters added to the game, and we're going to start with Dawn here. Dawn is incredible. Move one energy from a bench Pokemon to an active Pokemon. This would already be good if it was just only added without anything else in Space-Time Smackdown, but there's so many great cards like Manaphy, Dialga that allow you to generate extra energy, and Dawn makes some phenomenal plays. Dawn is either A or S for me. I might move this card a little higher. I do think in many decks that you can use Dawn in, it is phenomenal. Such a powerful ability. Immediately what springs to mind is something like Moltres and either Charizard or Infernape. However you want to play that, you could throw the energy from the bench right up to Moltres and start attacking for 70. Dialga has similar plays where it starts swinging for 100. So I just think Dawn is really, really incredible. And there's so many decks that can get great value from Dawn. Alright, next let's talk about Mars. Mars is a weird card. So it's a supporter card, it's a trainer, right? Which means you can only play one of these a turn. And you will force your opponents to shuffle their hand back into their deck, which could be pretty good, and it's based on the amount of points they need to win left. So if they've already KO'd an EX Pokemon, they're going to have one card that they draw. And I actually think this card may find some value in certain situations, but one of the biggest problems in Pocket is you've got a 20 card deck. There is not a lot of room for fluff, and if you instead of having Cyrus, have Mars, I think you're going to be very disappointed in your choice. I'm going to put it C tier. I don't think it's necessarily terrible, but I also just think your deck space is so unbelievably valuable, and one card off could be a big problem. However, the time you throw this and get rid of a really important card in your opponent's hand, kind of similar to how red card worked, you will provide a lot of value. You kind of throw this early in some weird ways, and I think it's just almost a wash or maybe even bad. Next, Volkner. Volkner is really cool. So Electivire or Luxray take advantage of this. I really think this is a Luxray card, basically. I mean, you could do some Electivire stuff with it, but I think Volkner is pretty good. It's extremely specific, right? It's only good for one deck, essentially. Maybe one or two decks, right? Electivire, Luxray, or Luxray with something else. But in that deck, pretty solid. You choose energy from your discard pile, and you will attach up to two energy from your discard to either Electivire or Luxray. You get discarded energy by retreating, using moves that discard energy, a Pokemon getting KO'd. Lots of ways for your discard pile to fill up with energy, and Volkner creates some really cool plays. Again, extremely specific, but when you are using it in that deck, pretty solid. Team Galactic Grunt. I have a theory about Team Galactic Grunt that I'll hit you with here in a second. Put a random Glameow, Stunky, or Croagunk from your deck into your hand. This is obviously garbage. This card is so bad. Yeah, it's awful. The only thing I can assume is there will possibly be a play in the next set where one or more of these Pokemon has an EX that can maybe make something happen. This card feels like it has very, very little value, especially considering the cards you're looking for are not super ideal. These are basics in a line that is not stellar already. Prove me wrong, but I feel like Team Galactic Grunt is just almost useless card right now. Cynthia, very similar to Volkner. I think it has a little less value just because it is I mean, it's kind of only for one deck, but I'm going to put it in the B tier here, just as sort of a situational card. When you are able to play Cynthia with Garchomp or Togekiss, this does do a surprising amount of damage to your opponents, except you'd never be surprised because if you see a Togekiss deck or a Garchomp deck, you know that they are running 2 copies of Cynthia. 150 damage from Chomp, possibly even more from Togekiss if they've already hit once. A powerful card that will help you sweep your opponents in a very, very specific deck. And now finally, Cyrus. Cyrus, switch one of your opponent's benched Pokemon that has damage on it into the active spot. Cyrus is a meta-shaping card. It is unbelievably good. It is kind of the reason that decks like Pikachu are not as relevant anymore. Even decks like Mewtwo. I mean, you would remember with Mewtwo Gardevoir decks, you know, you'd have 2 Mewtwo EXs. One would head back to the bench. You couldn't get it out of there because if you Sabrina'd, they're throwing up something that you don't need. Yeah, this is an extremely powerful card. I would say it is clearly S tier. The only supporter that comes close to it this set for me is Dawn. Dawn is quite close, but I do think Cyrus is one of the best cards in the game and one of the most meta-defining cards in the game, which is awesome for a new supporter. And yeah, it has really changed the game. Our next card, Pokemon Communication. This is insanely good. There are a few decks that can't really use this card, but every single deck that needs to find a stage 2, even some decks that need stage 1s, or you just need to kind of swap a few things around, Pokemon Communication is the lifeline that you never had before, making so many more options relevant. I think this is an amazing card. It's like, again, it's right there with Dawn. Like, all these cards I'm talking about here up in S and A are just so incredibly good. Pokemon Communication is phenomenal, and it will be one of those cards that will always have value unless a better version of it comes out. Our first tool here, Giant Cape. I feel like Giant Cape might be S. It's either S or A. The thing about Giant Cape is it gives you 20 more HP, which changes the breakpoints for so many cards. A card that used to have 140 HP now goes to 160. It changes what can KO it. Your opponents have to make different decisions because of it. You even look at something like Manaphy. When you're putting it out in that active spot, you could put Cape on it and it will survive just about anything that can hit it early, giving you the ability to generate energy. I could give example after example after example. Giant Cape feels like another one of those cards that just completely changes how you have to play. Lumberry. I don't really know. I don't know. I feel like Lumberry is kind of bad. Here's the thing. Lumberry in tournaments might have some value, especially if the meta starts to lean a certain way. Lumberry in just like you're queuing up in the like win events or something, this just feels so irrelevant. I mean, yeah, I guess you could throw it into a certain, like you could throw it into a Pachirisu deck for an extra tool. But I don't really know what you would be getting out of this card. There aren't a ton of status conditions where you're like, I'm running into Weezing every single game, or I'm running into Mismagius every single game. I really want something to deal with it. However, next set comes out. We have EX Pokemon that do something like that. They're very meta relevant. And then all of a sudden, this card finds a slot in so many decks, right? So right now, I would say the value of this is pretty low. I might even put it D tier, especially given that you're not able to see what your opponents are playing. But in the future, this could be very, very good. Rocky Helmet is an extremely good card. I don't think it's as good as Cape, but I do think it sets up a ton of amazing plays. And in some matches, it would be much better than Cape, right? The incredible thing about Rocky Helmet is it kind of turns every Pokemon into a Druddigon, or a Druddigon into like Druddigon EX with the ability to, you know, throw 40 damage back at your opponents. This punishes your opponents for attacking you. And just like Cape, but in sort of a different way, it creates opportunities where you can KO your opponents. It also unlocks Cyrus opportunities if they happen to hit you one time. Now, all of a sudden, they're essentially marked for that Cyrus play later in the game. Rocky Helm and Cape are both incredibly good. I do think Cape is generally more useful, but we're talking about 2 insanely good cards here. Next, I want to start talking about Pokemon that are non-EX Pokemon. I'm not going to go through all of them, and you know what? I should do a brief explanation as to why here really quick. So let's talk about a card that I'm not going to go into. Torterra. This is a great example. So Torterra is an interesting card. It's a stage 2, pretty decent HP, 150 damage on its attack. It does cost 4 energy, 2 grass, and 2 colorless. I I could see a reality where maybe a superior deck could have some fun with this. Frenzy Plant, you can't use the turn after you attack. So, yeah. I do think, given the way this set looks, and I have no information that would tell me this, but I do think that Empoleon and Torterra are in this set because eventually we will have Empoleon EX and Torterra EX probably for our mini set, right? It just feels like it makes total sense that that would happen considering we have Infernape. I'm not in love with this card, and I just don't think there are a ton of decks that are going to get a ton of value out of it. I don't see anyone running it. I've tried to make a few of these. Like another great example is something like Mamoswine. I've got some opinions on this card. I don't think it's phenomenal. I think there are a lot of other things that you could play, and there will be cards like that that I won't be talking about in this list. However, the cards that I am talking about, I feel like are either seen in a lot of decks or pretty relevant in the meta. So there are ones I'm going to miss. Like we're not going to be talking about, Roserade. I just haven't seen much of it, and I don't know that it's going to be particularly meta relevant. Okay, on to our first one, Staraptor. Staraptor I don't think is great. It's 3 colorless energy to do 80 damage, and you like lock your opponents in there. I could see some decks making some plays with this, which could be kind of cool. My favorite card in this line is actually Starly. I think Starly is a really fun card. I was using this on stream the other day. When you do damage with Pluck, I think the big thing, like read the text here, you take their tool before you do damage. So Rocky Helm, you don't take any revenge damage, and then Cape, you're essentially hitting them not for 20 but for 40 because you're removing Cape, you're discarding all these tools. This is kind of a cool card, but in general I just don't think Staraptor has a ton of value. You're probably better off just going with something like Arbok if you're looking to make a play like this. Maybe in the future with a Staraptor EX and this Starly, you could see some really cool stuff. For now, I think I'm just going to put this card probably D tier. I don't think it's very good. Maybe C, but it just doesn't feel that relevant to me. Next, we have Porygon Z. Buggy Beam's able to do 80 damage, and it will change the energy your opponent generates on the next turn to a random energy of one of the types inside the game. So this is really funny, really cool, extremely troll. I don't think there are a lot of decks that can take advantage of it. However, when this works, it is like crazy good. Like if you're changing the energy your opponent's Darkrai is attaching, they're not doing damage with Nightmare Aura. I changed the energy a Palkia needed to use its move. It didn't get the water energy, so it couldn't use that massively powerful 150 damage move. This is funny and probably not great. I'll put it at, I think D is probably for maybe C, like maybe low C tier. Next card I want to talk about is Garchomp. I think Garchomp is fine, but it still suffers from the same thing that other Dragon decks suffer from, like other Dragon decks, really meaning Dragonite here, is it requires 2 different colors of energy. It does do solid damage, and Reckless Shearing is an okay ability. You know, Cynthia comboing with this, it is pretty good, but you could just brick with this in some annoying ways, and really until they add a way for Dragon decks not to brick, the highest I could put a card like this is C tier. Yes, you'll have some great games, but you'll also have plenty of games where you just brick on energy in some annoying ways. It's adding even more variance to your game, I think, is the best way to look at it, right? You already are having this issue like, oh, do I get my stage 1 or my stage 2? Okay, I got my stage 1, and I have my stage 2. Amazing. Did I get my supporter card, Cynthia? I didn't grab my supporter card, Cynthia. Now, all that lines up. Did I get the right energy? Well, I had fighting energy earlier, but the Pokemon with it on it got KO'd, and now for 3 turns in a row, I've pulled water energy, and I can't attack. And because of that, I think this card, it can't be any higher. It's a little easier to get online than Dragonite, which is cool. Cynthia pairs with it, also quite cool. But yeah, the variance just, this is the highest it can go. Bastiodon is a really cool card. Guarded Grill sets up some amazing plays. So 50-50, your opponents do 100 less damage to you, which does mean that you could survive a Crimson Storm from Charizard with this card. 80 damage for 3 energy on Headbang is a little light, but Guarded Grill is just such a crazy good ability. I feel like this card is probably B. Maybe that's a little high. It's really specific, but honestly, once it's online, it's really, really strong. Fossils, kind of just like dragons, when fossils get a supporter card that lets you consistently power them and dig them up. People are saying like Rourke or something like that. I think this could be a really powerful card. Already, I do like decks like this, but there is inconsistency there with the fossil. Next, let's talk about Skarmory. 80 HP, 20 damage with its attack metal arms. I'm not seeing any metal arms here, buddy. I don't know what's going on. 30 more damage if you have a tool attached. This thing slaps so hard. I love this card. I might be overrating it, but I'm putting it up into the A tier. Attacking on your first turn, whether you're going, first, you'd be turn 3, or you're going second. Attacking turn 1, 50 damage. You put Geo on this thing and you're smacking for 60 turn 1. Insanely aggressive card, and I freaking love it. And tools are so good in this game that it's like, oh no, I have to put a tool on my Pokemon to give it more sustainability, or a Rocky. I'm like, I love Skarmory. I think it's so good, so fun. The Skarmory deck is probably like, maybe like B-ish tier at times, but I do think this card is freaking awesome. I love it. I said I wasn't going to talk about too many Pokemon like this, but I have had experience with Toxicroak, and I mean, this is like, seriously, put it in the trash card. It's so inconsistent. You're flipping coins for every Pokemon you have on the bench. I mean, it's probably just my experience flipping so many tails in a row with this card, but in general, you just don't need to add more ways to not win. Like Toxicroak is like, hey, do you want to make it harder to win? Let's start playing this, Team Galactic Grunt Toxicroak deck. Yeah. This is a no from me. I had to pull up the nice art for Spiritomb right here. I absolutely love this art. Spiritomb, Swirling Disaster, colorless energy, so really splashable. You can put this in a ton of decks. You can attack every card on the board for 10 damage, right? You hit everything all at once. This sets up a lot of great Cyrus plays. Every time I have this in a deck, you have to know why you have it there and how you plan on finishing your opponents with it. But given that Cyrus is so amazing and you just need a little damage to put everything on the side of your opponent's board in trouble, I think this is actually a pretty solid card. It can't really be any higher than B, I wouldn't say. But the decks that slot this in, and I feel like the B tier is sort of shaping up to be this right here. Decks that can put this card in, I do think are going to get a lot of value from it. Also, that art's insane. I might as well use the pretty art for Lucario too, huh? Lucario, let's talk about it. Submarine Blow, 2 energy, and you're hitting for 40. That's fine, but because of your ability, Fighting Coach, you are hitting for an additional 20. You can have 2 Lucarios on the board. This ability does stack, unlike something like Superior, right? And I think for a lot of fighting decks, this is a real game changer. This is going to go up into the A tier for me. It's made decks like literally you see Hitmonchan in that art right here. I feel like it's made Hitmonchan extremely relevant. It doesn't work for Hitmonlee because it doesn't attack the active spot, but one can dream. And I mean, Marshadow now cracks for 120. Rampardos is hitting for 150. Lucario is an insanely good fighting card, and it's made every fighting deck better, basically. Speaking of another non-EX fighting card, I want to talk about Rampardos. 150 HP, 130 damage with Head Smash. If you have Lucario on the board, that's 150. 2 Lucarios, you do the math. I can't figure it out. This card's really, really strong. However, it still suffers from sort of that fossil variance. This is close to A tier for me. In fact, Bastiodon and Rampardos are both close to A tier for me. I still think because of that little variance, I'm going to set it into the B tier here. It's a very specific deck, but it's also been doing pretty decent in tournaments. So maybe I'm just slightly undervaluing it a little, but this thing is getting KOs. I mean, it's KOing pretty much every EX Pokemon it's going to run into, except for some of the insanely bulky ones. All right, we've been pulling up some pretty art, so I'm going to continue doing it. Mesprit, 3 energy, and you're able to do 160 damage. Really powerful. Only 70 HP. You discard all the energy attached to it, and you need Uxie and Azelf on the bench. I think this card is probably C tier, maybe even D tier. You You can make a really fun Lake Spirit deck with it. It just needs so many things to work out for you. I don't think it's going to be super consistent until maybe one of the cards in this set has like an EX opportunity. Maybe there's like a Giratina that could work with this really well in the next set. But for now, I think this card is not super great. And while we're on the topic, we might as well talk about Azelf while we're here. I actually think Azelf can be put into a lot of Psychic decks and have some decent value. Being able to attack any of your opponent's Pokemon, including the active spot, for 20 damage and 70 HP isn't bad. I'm going to go ahead and put this into our C tier as well. It may be a little higher. I do think it's better than Mesprit. If you want, I could say maybe Mesprit's D, but it's not Croagunk bad. It's just not very good. Giratina is a cool card. So Giratina's ability Levitate, if you have any energy attached, which by the way, this doesn't need to be psychic energy, it has 0 retreat cost. So you can play with this card as an option to stall your opponents, place it in the active spot, stall them for a moment. You could put Rocky Helm on this. You could be annoying. You can then levitate, pull this card back to the bench, and dawn the energy up to the card you are looking to fight with. I think this is also kind of hanging out in this B tier area right here. We will probably see some really cool plays with this, but I do wonder if this is just sort of giving us a little taste of what's to come with Giratina EX that could be in the next set. Dusknoir is a really fun card, and it's probably not very good, but the decks you put it in, it does some really cool stuff. So let's talk about Shadow Void. As often as you like during your turn, you can pick any Pokemon that has damage and move all of it to Dusknoir. One interesting thing about this is, let's say Dusknoir has 10 HP left. You could still move all the damage over to Dusknoir. It's not like you can only move 10 over, which can be really cool. The tough thing about it is stage 2. It's a 2 retreat cost. It's kind of hard to get out. It requires a lot of energy if you do want to attack. I think there are some decks that can have some fun with this. Like you can play this with Cresselia in some fun ways. But yeah, in general, I don't have a lot of love for this card. I think at best I could say C tier for something like this. There are some cool decks, but I just, it's fine. It's like when it works, it's cool, and it doesn't always give you that much value. And to elaborate on why I guess I would say it doesn't give a lot of value, you need to hit a stage 2. You can't really use these cards in the active spot if you're not a psychic deck. Even if you are, they're extremely energy hungry, and a lot of things in the game will not hit you for small chips of damage. They will KO you in one big burst. So that's the tricky part about a card like this. Togekiss is really interesting. So this is 140 HP. Overdrive Smash is pretty good. You're attacking for 60 damage. Next turn, if you attack 2 turns in a row, you're attacking for 120. It pairs with Cynthia. Also another card to look at here. Togetic is a really solid stage 1. So if you go turn 1, right, you can't attack. But if you have Togepi in that active spot, on turn 3, you can swing with Togetic, which is pretty solid. 1 psychic energy, 40 damage with 80 HP. I don't know what it is about this. It does just feel like a little underwhelming, which is weird because it reads like it's pretty good. And I do think once you get it set up, you can make some big plays with it. It might be the 140 HP that's the problem. It might be that there are other cards with around this much HP that do more damage without a turn of setup. But with Cynthia, it does do some really solid damage. I think this might be a little high, honestly. I'm going to put it into the B tier. This might be a little high, but I do think on paper, this card feels very good. In practice, I don't feel like I've found a lot of decks that are absolutely amazing with it. And a big part of that could just be that Psychic isn't crushing it right now. This is weak to Metal, which you see a lot of. Other Psychics could be weak to Dark, which you see a lot of. So maybe that's kind of been a big part of what's going on with Togekiss. And then, of course, anything that's stage 2, if you're comparing, like, let's say Togekiss stage 2 to an EX that's stage 2, those cards are a lot more powerful. All right, the next card I want to talk about is Rotom. It has the ability Assault Laser, does 20 damage. If the opponent has a tool on it, does 30 more. This is like kind of a worse version of Skarmory. Like Skarmory is hitting, and if it has a tool, it does more damage, which you can control a lot better. The cool thing about this card is it is colorless, so you can put this in a lot of different decks. I'm going to put it in our C tier. I think there are definitely some options for it, but it is a little tough when you don't know what your opponent's running, because there are times you just can't get great value out of this card. Okay, next we have Luxray. Guys, I mean, I've become a Luxray believer. I know it hasn't put up insane results in tournaments yet, even though not everything is like just only tournament based too. Like, if I think the card's just good in general and it's playing well in a lot of the games you're mostly going to play, I think that's fine. But it has some okay runs in tournaments. I do think its ability paired with Volkner is legit pretty dang good. It is pretty dang good. 120 damage to any Pokemon on the board. That is massive. You pair that with Volkner, you can Volt Bolt next turn, Volkner, Volt Bolt again. Okay? That felt like a tongue twister right there, but I actually think this card is pretty solid. It's maybe still in the B tier, like high B tier. But I really like Luxray. It might even be going close to the A tier for me. I gotta say, more than a lot of the cards in this set, I'm a real believer of Luxray right now. I think it's really cool. It is a little tough getting Shinx and Luxio powered up sometimes. One tricky thing about them is they're both not very good, so that does make it a little hard. Electivire, I feel like, is not as good. There's definitely a combination of this deck that's really cool, obviously, right? Like, Volkner works with both of these cards. This can do 120 damage to the active spot. It just needs 4 lightning energy, which Volkner helps you get. So, I don't hate this card, but I do think for me it's a little worse than Luxray. I'm going to go ahead and put it in our C tier. This combination together, though, pretty solid, but I think outside of that, you probably wouldn't use it too much. Magnezone, one of the best cards in the set, for sure. I'm going to put this up into our S tier. So the reason, of course, is because of Magneton as well. This card just by itself, it isn't it. But because Magneton generates its own energy as a stage 1, and it doesn't have to be in the active spot, it can be on the bench. In fact, let me just go ahead and scroll up. I'll find it for you here, because it's the combination of these two cards together. The Genetic Apex Magneton right here with Volt Charge, the stage 1, allowing you to take lightning energy from your energy zone, even if you're not playing a lightning deck, and attach it to this Pokemon. You then get this charged up. The turn you play it, it can Volt Charge. The next turn, it can Volt Charge again. You could Magnezone right there, put a colorless energy with it, and start attacking. So that's the reason you're seeing it so much. I have a video on my channel talking more about this, and it's something like Magnezone is the best card in the set, which is maybe... I mean, there are a few cards like really vying for that spot, but it's one of the best Pokemon in the new set for sure, especially non-EX, and it's the reason you see it in so many decks. I would say it's without question one of the S tier cards in the set. Our next card is Manaphy, a basic Pokemon that uses the ability Oceanic Gift for a single water energy. You choose 2 benched Pokemon, and you give each of those a water energy. This card's insanely good. It's crazy good. I feel like it's changed the game for water decks, and it's especially good with things like Palkia. It makes Vaporeon even more relevant. You could play it with Blastoise. You could play it with Gyarados. I mean, there are just like a lot of great ways that this card could be played. I honestly might just be putting it in our S tier right here. I do think it's a game changer for water decks. Maybe this is a little closer to A, but... like maybe it's kind of in the realm of Lucario a little, but given how good this makes certain water cards and how relevant a few of them are, I don't think it's unfair to say that this is one of the most impactful new cards in the set. Especially, again, for specifically water decks or colorless decks too, which can use this. Next we have Shaman. I think Shaman is decent. It's really fun running a few decks where you have like multiple Shaman and you're kind of out healing your opponents and doing some silly stuff. It's not D tier bad, but it's not like amazingly good. I'm gonna put it in our C tier. I think it's a cool card, and in certain decks it can be really annoying to deal with the persistent HP recovery you get from it. This also just makes Butterfree like, we'll never see you again, Butterfree. 07, buddy. All right, let's move on to some of our EX Pokemon. Licky EX, 160 HP, 4 energy for Licking Fury is going to let you do 100 damage up to, infinity for how many heads that you flip with this card. The HP is good. Being weak to fighting is a little rough because fighting is pretty dang popular right now. The retreat cost is obviously insane. It does feel like one of the issues with a card like Licky Licky is with 4 energy, there are very few decks you can play this with except for Dialga, maybe something like, yeah, I'm just trying to think of like another way to power this really. It's hard, right? Like Manaphy can't power it, Moltres can't power it. I think it's just kind of set up to play with Dialga. And there it's fine. You can have some decent games with it. But you might get even more value out of just powering like uh, even like Melmetal, some of the Reggies. I don't know. I kind of like powering in Mega with Dialga even more. So I think Licky Licky is a obviously it's okay, but like the highest I could go is C. And while we're on Licky Licky and I'm putting this card in the C tier, I just want to be clear that because I'm putting Licky Licky EX in the C tier doesn't mean I'm directly comparing Licky Licky EX to necessarily Garchomp. More oftentimes I'm comparing it to kind of every card and mostly to other EX cards, right? Other things that are relevant in that same sort of category, right? I'm not really comparing Volkner to Spiritomb, which is why I'm sort of doing these in like kind of like sets like this. So we're on EX Pokemon now. I think it's fine. You could have some cool decks with it. We had a lot of fun with it and Dialga. Speaking of Dialga, let's go ahead and talk about it right now. Dialga is the next on our list. Ooh, let's do the pretty art Dialga. The immersive Dialga right here. Metallic Turbo for 2 metal energy. I always want to call it steel from BGC. For 2 metal energy, you can do Metallic Turbo. This will take 2 energy from your energy zone and attach it to one of your benched Pokemon. This is the main reason you're playing Dialga. Heavy Impact's not too bad either, right? 100 damage, and with Dawn, you can do this on your second turn after you've used Metallic Turbo. So 1 turn, Metallic Turbo, power the bench. Next turn, you could Dawn and Heavy Impact, which is a pretty decent play. I do think Dialga is good. In certain decks, it's extremely valuable. One of the big issues I have with Dialga is if you are going first with Dialga, you're really far behind, right? So you go first, you have no energy generation, your opponents do get some energy. Then it's turn 3, you finally get your piece of energy. Back to your opponents. They've now had 2 turns to kind of set things up right here. It just takes a really long time to get online. But when it does, you power up some cool stuff on the bench. I think it's probably hanging out in the B tier here, but it's made a lot of metal decks way more relevant. And there are a few decks I really love with it. So no hate on Dialga, but I do think it's kind of like middle of the pack here. The next one I have coming up is Darkrai EX, and I don't have the beautiful Darkrai EX art here. Let's go ahead and just pull this one up. Darkrai EX is clearly a superstar from this set. 140 HP, Dark Prism, only 80 damage, but the big thing about Darkrai, of course, is Nightmare Aura. Nightmare Aura is insanely good. Every time you're putting Dark Energy on Darkrai, you are doing 20 damage to the opponent's active Pokemon. This doesn't trigger, Rough Skin from Drud or Rocky Helmet, or even effects like Marshadow's Revenge. If you were to KO a Pokemon with Nightmare Aura, it doesn't trigger that because it's not an attack, right? Same thing with Poison, by the way. That's like an interesting interaction with Marshadow that I think maybe a lot of people don't immediately notice. But this is just so good. A basic Pokemon that powers on the bench and does damage, has presence in so many different ways. Darkrai, I think, is clearly an S tier choice, especially with all the decks that you see it. One of the best EXs in the set, maybe our best EX. I think there's definitely an argument for it. Darkrai is crazy, crazy good. The next card I want to talk about is Weavile EX. Weavile's a weird one. I can't seem to find a really solid Weavile deck outside of Darkrai EX, Weavile EX, which is pretty dang good, right? 1 energy, which is amazing, to do 70 damage. Pretty dang strong. So your opponent has to have some damage on it, but of course, pairing that with Darkrai, you've already got an energy on Weavile. Darkrai is on the bench. It does 20 damage with Nightmare Aura. Weavile can start swinging. You're doing 90 in 1 turn. This is a really, really strong combo, but it's kind of the only combo that I've really found. Like, I was trying to play a bunch of decks with this, and I'm sure some people will come up with something cool. I think this is fine. It's kind of like C tier for me. maybe B. The only thing I find tough about rating this card any higher is I really just feel like it has one kind of relevant deck. Without any other cool cards with it, they can do some big burst damage, or with Darkrai, like chipping away at your opponent so you can set up big plays. I feel like it's hard to get insane value out of this. So to me, again, maybe I'm wrong, and I'll see some people make some cool decks. To me, this feels like a decent card, but just like insanely specific and situational. Next, we have Gallade EX. This one, like honestly, I'm hesitant to put it above the need more time section. I really have not sat down and made a great Gallade deck. I think there's some cool stuff with this though. It's fighting, right? Which is pretty solid right now because of Lucario. It does a lot of damage to your opponents based on the energy they have on them. So if you're able to get them off the bench while they are powering something up, this can crack them for a ton of damage, right? If you're able to pull up that Darkrai that has 3 energy on it or something like that, this is doing, a considerable amount of damage, doing 130 if they have 3 energy there. You get Lucario with it, and you're picking up KOs now. I think this is probably a B tier card, is what it feels like. And I haven't seen a lot of super relevant decks with it, but I personally need more time, so I can't really rank this fairly, I gotta be honest. And our next card kind of falls into this as well. Mismagius. I think Mismagius is actually probably also B tier for me, but I haven't spent enough time with it. So I would say Gallade, Mismagius. My early take is playing against it, playing it a few times, making a couple decks. These feel like decent cards. Only 2 energy, which is cool. Like a stage 1 like Mismagius at 2 energy is actually really solid, right? So if you're a turn 2 right here, this is really great. Turn 1, you get Misdreavus out there. Turn 4, or I guess so. Turn 2, your turn 1, you get Misdreavus out there. Turn 4, you have Mismagius attacking for 70 and confusing. Pretty decent. And confusion's not bad. So confusion stays on the opponent. And of course, unless they evolve or retreat. And if they try to attack, they're 50-50 as to whether the attack works at all. A little light on HP. 140 is not amazing for a stage 1. So I think I would probably put this B, but I would definitely want more time with it before I gave you like, this is a B tier card. Our next EX we're going to talk about, Pachirisu EX. I've got some beautiful art for this one. I might as well show you the art, right? I have some for a lot of these. I had Weavile, but I mean, I got to do the full art. Well, the full art's incredible, but this 2-star is so good too. Okay, so Pachirisu EX, 120 HP, Sparking Gadget, 40 damage. If you have a tool attached, it's 80. This is Pikachu without needing a full bench, right? I think this card is pretty good. I'm not sure I've seen a better deck for it kind of than Pachirisu 18 Trainer, which is a little like meh. I was playing it a bit with Luxray yesterday, and that felt pretty good. I'd say overall this feels kind of like B tier to me. Pretty dang good. A few decks that work out kind of well for it and do some decent damage. Maybe this could be slightly higher. But I also think 80 is not that amazing. And it takes 2 turns to get online. So for me, this is about a B tier card for Pachirisu. Our next card is going to be, I'll just pull my favorite art up, Palkia EX. This has been like some of the coolest art in the entire game. I think I love seeing this card on the bench, right? I guess I could have this going. I don't have it set up right, but I could take us into Palkia EX. So I think this card not only is beautiful, but I do think Palkia is an insanely meta relevant card. I'm probably going to put it up into our S tier right here. Yeah, I think it's really, really good. Its ability to attack for 1 energy is really nice, right? It's something that a lot of these EX Pokemon that are kind of like this. It feels like Blastoise can't attack for 1, Gyarados can't attack for 1, but this can. Then you have Dimensional Storm, 150 damage. You do need to discard 3 water energy, but it also hits your entire opponent's bench. So it's probably, not always, but it's probably a one-hit KO into what you are dealing with, or by the time you decide to bring it in, it's gonna be a one-hit KO. And then it puts damage on everything on your opponent's side, setting up big Cyrus plays. I think Palkia is one of the best cards in the set, one of the best EX cards in the set. Next, we can talk about our next EX card, which is Infernape EX. I think Infernape is really good. I don't think it's Darkrai Palkia good, but I do think Infernape is quite good. I haven't seen it have an insane run in a tournament yet, so maybe I'm overrating this card a little bit, but 2 energy for 140 damage KOs a ton of the roster. Especially cards like you're going to need your Darkrai to have a cape, right? Even like certain grass cards you can KO. Executor is like 160, so you could KO Executor EX. Of course, you could KO like other cards like Celebi, Zapdos, like any of those cards would go down. Pachirisu goes down. So many cards will go down to this in one hit, which is really great. You do lose all the energy from it, but you only need 2. And Dawn sets up an opportunity for you to fight the immediate next turn with Flare Blitz. It has 0 retreat cost. It just has a lot of great stuff going on with it. And I would like to see more people play it. I'm going to put it up into our A tier. I think it's a really, really good card. Our final EX card that I want to talk about is Pachirisu again. No, it's a Yanmega EX. So I think Yanmega it's really close to S tier for me. And the big reason, of course, is colorless energy. So insanely like splashable. You can put this in so many different decks because it does not matter what energy your deck is running for this card. Low retreat cost, decent HP at 140, not incredible, right? Decent HP, you're probably going to need a cape on this thing. However, Air Slash at 120 does mean that these new dark cards like Weavile and Darkrai, because they are weak to bug type, they are weak to grass type in this, they are going to get cracked and taken down in 1, which I think is really, really powerful. I don't think this is higher than A tier, however, but I do kind of want to put it up here. It's probably a little better than Infernape. The cool thing about a card like this is there are a lot of decks that could be made really relevant with this card. Like you can play it with Dialga. You can play it with a grass deck, of course. You could play it with eggs. There's just a lot of situations you could get this card powered up, and because of that, I think it could be a pretty relevant card. So that's about everything that I wanted to go through here in Space-Time Smackdown. Now it's time for me to choose a God tier card, and it's kind of hard for me to choose a God tier card because I really do think basically everything in our S tier has a shot at being the God tier card. I am going to give it to 2 cards. We are freaking Norse around here. For me, it is Cyrus and Magnezone. I do think Magnezone is clearly set up as like the best non-EX card in the set because of how Magneton works. The ability to power something up on your bench for free and then get in and hit for a considerable amount of damage with great HP. And you can continue to do whatever other strategy you're working on is why you see it in so many decks. We have Magnezone Hitmonlee. We have Magnezone Darkrai. We have Magnezone Palkia. We've got Magnezone Team Galactic Grunt. That last one might be a lie. That maybe it can't even save that. But I do think that card is insanely good. And then if we are taking a look at maybe the best supporter, it's probably Cyrus. I do think it's the most game-changing card. While Sabrina is still relevant because you can't get a Pokemon off the bench with no damage with Cyrus. You are playing it in decks where you know what you're going to be doing. Like having a Cyrus in a Darkrai or Palkia deck is an absolute no-brainer. It's so easy to do some damage to an important card on your opponent's side, bring it up and KO it. And that's kind of why I think like decks like Mewtwo, Pikachu, and stuff like that are a little less relevant. The plays where you used to be able to sort of hit and run with your opponents, bring in the other thing, you can't get that Mewtwo out of there. Well, now you can because of Cyrus. So Let me know what you think in the comments. What did I get right? What did I get wrong? What am I undervaluing? What am I overvaluing? As always, I love to hear everyone's opinions. I love to have you guys, discuss amongst yourselves as well. Just be cool to each other. And of course, my thoughts on some of this could change as the set continues to move on. We may be having another one in like 20 days, it looks like, for Pokemon Day, which could be kind of crazy. So I wanted to get this out with like a lot of my early thoughts on Space-Time Smackdown. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for listening. I hope it was entertaining and informational. I hope it was infotainment. I'll see y'all next time. Yeehaw. Nerf Misty. We just gotta nerf it.